Well, hello and welcome back to another... Sorry, I had a hair in my mouth. Welcome back to Theory Thursday, where we react to the best theories on YouTube right now about Five Nights at Freddy's, and we absolutely rip them apart and destroy them. And today, our latest victim is going to be the one, the only... not OzzyMcDozzy, but Hyper Droid. So if you don't know who Hyper Droid is, they are a very, very fantastic theorist in the FNAF community, and they're saying that they just solved the Shadow Animatronics, and that's the one we're going to be reacting to today. Now, it is a 30-minute video, so I'm going to see if I can edit some parts out that, you know, don't take away from the whole premise, just to make it shorter. But let's react to Hyper Droid's video saying that they have solved the Shadow Animatronics.
FNAF's infamous Shadow Animatronics. Numerous characters that appear all throughout the franchise whose lore is extremely important, yet
yeah, I will say, working on the FNAF 2 Faz Facts right now, the Shadow Animatronics are very much still a mystery. I don't really have an answer for them yet. I'm still looking, but hopefully this video can help us out in that regard.
still shrouded in so much mystery. These shadows first started appearing back in FNAF 2, but are still appearing in modern day. So what actually are the shadows? How many are there? What are they doing around in modern day? And why are there so many Nightmare On plushies?
That you know what? You're asking all the right questions, Hyper Droid. Let's see where you take this.
Well, today I think I have an answer to all of that and more. So subscribe to the channel if you're new and turn on notifications, like the video and consider becoming a channel member if you enjoy. Remember, this is all just a theory and my interpretation of the evidence. And before we begin on
Don't worry, we're still gonna rip into you.
First, let's talk about who is classified as a Shadow Animatronic, to figure out just how many we're dealing with here. First of all, we know of Shadow Freddy, modeled after Withered Golden Freddy, and Rocker for Fazsax. Shadow Bonnie
Rakusafax.
for sure, modeled after Toy Bunny. The first two shadows that originated back in FNAF 2 as rare chance Easter eggs. Neither would actually kill you, but instead if you stared too long, your game would simply crash. Then FNAF 3 rolled around, Shadow Freddy appearing in the gameplay portions as a rare crumpled suit Easter egg, being called Shadow Freddy in the files, and the
Yeah, that's pretty damning evidence. I agree with that.
suit's true color being purple once you color correct the intense screen lighting into white, as well as appearing in the Follow Me end of night minigames, luring the FNAF 1 animatronics back to the safe room and therefore back into William's joyful hands. Shadow Bonnie, however, appears in one of the hidden minigames, Glitch, on your path to the happiest day, where you use it to, well, glitch through the previous minigames, eventually giving a child their cake, then actually return in Ultimate Custom Night. Shadow Freddy via Nightmare, and Shadow Bonnie as an antagonist spawned by DD's shadow form XOR. In the modern games,
Oh, we're talking about all the Shadow characters. Okay, hold on.
Shadow Freddy is referenced in Help Wanted with Blacklight Freddy, although it's unclear if we can count this as an official appearance, while Shadow Bonnie appears as the main antagonist in FNAF AR Special Delivery, and later appearing as a cutout character in Security Breach. Besides those two, we then got a character called Nightmare On, which replaces Nightmare in FNAF 4's Halloween Edition. And while Scott has confirmed the gameplay of the Halloween Edition is not canon, Nightmare On did later appear in canon through Ultimate Custom Night, Help Wanted, and Security Breach with his numerous plushies found everywhere throughout the Pizzaplex. I believe Nightmare On is meant to be a Shadow Agony creature just like the rest.
Shadow Agony creature. I like it.
Due to not only literally replacing Shadow Freddy and sharing his exact same characteristics, but his voice line in Ultimate Custom Night,
I am the fearful reflection of what you have created.
which is a parallel to Nightmare's voice line,
I am your wickedness, made flesh.
as well as its naming convention with it literally being called Nightmare On instead of Nightmare Puppet, like it should be like everyone else in the game, which is likely because Nightmare On is really Nightmare Shadow Puppet, replacing Nightmare, which is really Nightmare Shadow Freddy, and Nightmare On later being referenced as just Nightmare with its plushies. As we mentioned earlier, in Ultimate Custom Night, DD has a shadow form named XOR that gets officially dubbed as Shadow DD in both the Ultimate Guide and the Character Encyclopedia. Speaking of the Character Encyclopedia though, that's also where we get told that these sprites in the FNAF 3 minigames are actually meant to be shadow variants of the characters, such as the Shadow Cupcakes, the Shadow Puppet, and Shadow Balloon Boy. Then finally in Help Wanted we get introduced to a shadowed Mangle called Blacklight Mangle. Therefore in total we have about 8 shadows.
Because here's the thing, right? Originally when you reference Shadow Animatronics, you're talking about Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie. right? Because those are the ones that are introduced in FNAF 2, and they were brought back for mini games and for the rest of the games, and they're pretty prominent. Like, there's obviously some lore significance to them. Yeah, no, there's a lot of other Shadow animatronics, but I feel like, I mean, it depends where this theory goes, but I feel like if you look at every single one of them individually, you start to get lost in the weeds a bit about what you're actually trying to solve here. So we'll see where this theory goes, but there's a lot more Shadow animatronics than I honestly thought.
In total, we have about 8 shadows. So now that we know the amount, what on earth is a shadow? Well, to learn that, we look at a surprising place, but one where a shadow takes center stage. FNAF AR Special Delivery. Within FNAF AR, there's a Remnant collection section where you, well, collect Remnant. Although around the Remnant orbs are darker orbs that you might accidentally pick up in the process, eventually collecting too many in order to spawn Shadow Bunny. These dark orbs are likely meant to be agony, which to define in the simplest way possible, as we learn through multiple sources in the FNAF universe, if there's a large amount of emotional agony generated, mainly due to a tragedy, that agony can then actually infect a nearby object, and cause it to appear haunted without even having a specific spirit tied to it or a soul attached.
By far one of the coolest mechanics in all of FNAF.
This agony in extreme cases can even go on to manifest itself into an agony being, as we see in this very game, where collecting too much agony eventually causes Shadow Bunny to manifest. This idea also perfectly correlates to another place Shadow Bunny takes center stage, the Fazbear Fright story Hide and Seek. Within this story, Shadow Bunny is originally just a cardboard cutout character in a hide-and-seek attraction, simply being called a black shadowed bunny, that eventually manifests itself into a real creature due to the pure agony and rage that the main protagonist, Toby, inflicts onto the attraction after losing, it growing more and more as the story progresses due to Toby continuing to inflict rage and agony onto those around him, basically feeding him power. And then once Toby finally lets go of his agony and admits, "You win, you beat me, I give up, I don't care anymore," Shadow Bunny then completely disappears, only for Toby to then return to the attraction with more rage and agony, claiming that Bunny cheated, causing Shadow Bunny to immediately reappear as monstrous as ever. It seems extremely likely that the shadows that we see through the story are creatures generated from the agony of select tragedies.
We're only, what, 6 minutes in the video, and I think that is a very good point to make. I'll give you a Faz point for it, Hyper Droid. Congratulations.
Not only that, but his first appearance happens to be him literally in this same room with the other MCI in order to possibly link them together. Then we add the books onto the equation, where within the second novel, The Twisted Ones, we read about a shadowy Freddy-like figure that was almost featureless and flat, yet still distinct from the shadows surrounding it. This pretty clearly being Shadow Freddy. The main protagonists then believe that the bear wants them to follow, referencing Follow Me, which then leads them to the underground directly to where the MCI were going, connecting the two together once again. This seems to imply that the MCI was the tragedy that generated the agony which eventually spawned Shadow Freddy, being the event that William inflicted his wickedness. This then makes the mystery a lot easier to solve when it comes to Shadow Bunny. Using the same logic that it was modeled after Toy Bunny to link it to a tragedy surrounding Toy Bunny, leads us to the only incident that occurs prior to FNAF 2 itself, the Dead Children's Incident, DCI for short. The second set of kids,
which, if you actually haven't watched my reaction to Withered Circles theory about whether there were 5 kids murdered or 10, MCI versus DCI, go check it out. It was actually a really good theory that completely switched my whole perspective on FNAF. But yeah, I'm glad that Hyperdroid brought this up. Another Faz point for you. But it is really weird that Rakusafax Shadow Bonnie was modeled specifically after Toy Bonnie,
that are shown to be freshly killed in the FNAF 2 location within the Save Them death minigame, which can be shown during Night 1, features William as the location's current guard, and features 2 items that have blood surrounding them which are different or even gone by the time the game begins, meaning the murders happened prior to the gameplay and it is able to be the event linked to Toy Bonnie. Shadow Bunny doesn't even seem to be the only one created from the agony of the DCI, with there being shadow forms of Balloon Boy, Puppet, and Mangle. Does this...
True. But then again, it's like, hey, well, where's the shadow version of Chica or Toy Freddy? But it's like their lack of presence is very profound.
mean each individual toy animatronic spawned its own unique shadow entity? I don't think so, but we'll get into why in a moment. Either way, this would then mean our conclusion for today is that Shadow Freddy was spawned from the MCI, while Shadow Bunny was spawned from the DCI. A neat parallel and a nice, easy and clean solution. right? Well, as you can tell, this video is nowhere near finished. So
Yeah,
of
no.
course the answer couldn't just be as easy as that.
Like, here's the thing, even if that was the answer, it's enough for me to accept it, but the majority of it is all speculation. There's no fast facts besides the fact of their character models and location that ties this theory together, and the fact that Agony forms the Shadow Animatronics. Sure, you know, we might use that as a fast fact, but everything else is pure speculation. So I'm glad that we're only 1/3 of the way in, and Hyper Droids already identifying that we need to go deeper into this, because as it stands right now, it's not a satisfying solution.
Altogether, this would then seem to imply that Shadow Bunny was created from the agony of an event caused by William like we theorized, but the actual form of it simply representing Spring Bunny, the character associated with William when causing the agony through the story, instead of specifically having to mean it's from Toy Bunny, like how it was in Hide and Seek.
I'm just gonna fact check something because I'm pretty sure. Like, here's the thing, I totally agree with you. The fact that it is a silhouette of Toy Bonnie, it's very weird. It doesn't fit at all, and I hate it. I hate it a lot. It would make more sense if it was in the silhouette of Spring Bonnie. Here we go. Literally in the Ultimate Guide, a shadow version of Toy Bonnie, similar to Golden Freddy, doesn't appear to follow normal laws of physics, appearing and disappearing at will, phasing through various mini-games in FNAF 3, and in special delivery when you collect too much Dark Remnant. It's a shadow version of Toy Bonnie.
This is even hinted at in the Into the Pit game, where Spring Bunny appears with a look identical to Shadow Bunny, the Easter egg being so blatant that in my Into the Pit breakdown I even incorrectly said that it was literally Shadow Bunny in this scene. The entire basis of Into the Pit is that it's Oswald travelling into a memory stemming from the pure agony that came from the MCI, said agony coincidentally choosing to take its main form as Spring Bunny, the entire game being a giant reference to the fact that there's an agony creature born from Spring Bunny. This is all then further back with the later games through Princess Quest, where we see that Glitch Trap, the suit literally being a form of Spring Bunny, just happens to resemble Shadow Bunny everywhere throughout the minigame.
But we literally just identified a fast fact for FNAF 2 that I will put in my video, saying that Shadow Bonnie is a shadow version of Toy Bonnie. Confirmed fast fact. Therefore, I like the connections being like, oh, well, this is a shadow version of Spring Bonnie or Spring Trap, maybe in the later games, but when it comes to specifically FNAF 2, it is a shadow version of Toy Bonnie. Period. That's its origins, period. Now, we need to figure out why.
And seemingly adapts to the environment, meaning Shadow Bunny can be representing Spring Bunny earlier in the timeline, but later look like Toy Bunny when literally in the toy location. Although, to be fair, it's also possible that Scott simply didn't want to make a new model for Spring Bunny back in FNAF 2, since it would be completely darkened anyways, Scott even stating that Shadow Bunny was the easiest model to make, since he just dipped Toy Bunny in black, but I do prefer—
I mean, true, but even if that was the case, like, in this book, you literally could have completely foregone the mention being like, oh, kind of looks like Toy Bonnie. Just say it's a shadow version of a Bonnie character. That's how you get around that. That's how this theory has legs. But right now, since it's been fast fact in the Ultimate Guide, no, it's not.
the answer that it simply switched forms due to being in the toy location, because saying it's a meta Scott reason is boring. It's FNAF, we gotta overcomplicate.
Yeah, like, you can go back and forth constantly being like, well, yeah, it could have changed forms. Sure, it could have. But if that's our understanding, and if that's the liquid theory that we have going around, then anyone can say like, oh yeah, well, technically, this shadow animatronic is actually a shadow version of this character that it doesn't resemble at all, but it took that shape because of the location it's in. You know, it just doesn't make it. If you let one thing be true for one mechanic and character of the game, the logic is you have to do it to all the characters. You have to assume that every character has that same right. And when you do that, it gets incredibly messy. Very messy. I could even argue that, hey, all those shadow animatronics, every single shadow animatronic is actually just one shadow animatronic that takes different forms and stuff based on the day. It's Tuesday, I'm now Balloon Boy. It's Wednesday, Maybe I'm the puppet.
But form aside, judging by the timeline of Midnight Motorist, this would then mean that Shadow Bunny would be the footprints, and was likely created from the agony of Charlie's death, which is coincidentally theorized to happen at Fredbear's Family Diner, the place where Shadow Bunny just happens to start from in his glitch minigame, which that screen comes from the minigame Stage 01, that just happens to showcase a single child going missing at Fredbear's. This then makes even more sense with Shadow Bunny representing Spring Bunny instead. It would be what Charlie directly associates with William, since she would know of his connection with it due to literally being the daughter of the co-owner Henry, who himself is associated with specifically Fredbear, as shown off in the novel trilogy, and the exact image then reappearing in Into the Pit 2. Shadow Bunny coming from Charlie's death is even possibly hinted at in Security Breach with its cutout, showcasing him sitting on top of a single grave instead of being in a graveyard or something similar, which
I mean, I'm pretty sure that specific cutout was from Help Wanted. Was it? I thought it was. From Help Wanted for the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. And it showed a bunch of the Freddy characters. And by the way, yeah, Shadow Bunny is a huge IP in Fazbear Entertainment's world when they created these games. So, like, obviously, later on down the lore, we'll get to the point where everything you learned about from the original FNAF can be just completely discredited, and all those Faz facts are completely useless, right? To the point where the Shadow Animatronics most likely never existed at all, period. But that's a whole can of worms for a different day. But like, there's a lot of reaching. You got long arms, Hyper Droid.
this theory would mean that he comes from a single death instead of the death of 5. This then means that we've concluded that Shadow Freddy is spawned from the agony of the MCI, while Shadow Bunny is spawned from the agony of Charlie's death. A nicer, easier, and cleaner solution. Please? Well, if I wanted to speedrun this video out, I would simply end it here. But that would then be avoiding the issues with my conclusion here that annoy me. Mainly the fact that multiple shadows have multiple events tied to it that could have created them. That multiple of those events are tied to multiple shadows. And that this solution doesn't answer the biggest and most important question of all. If the shadows are based off the agony of these prior events and are even referenced to be put to rest in the FNAF 6 fire, quote,
"This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should."
then why on earth is Shadow Bunny still around in FNAF AR? Shadow Freddy even referenced in FNAF Help Wanted, and the Nightmare On plushies appearing everywhere in Security Breach, as if they're all still around in the modern game.
No, I didn't fall asleep. Don't worry. I need to rewatch that. Hold on.
Should.
Okay, I will say though, FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator. In one of the tales from the Pizzaplex books, they do say, I believe it was a character playing on an arcade machine at the Pizzaplex, and they picked like Orville Elephant or something, and they're like, yeah, this is a character from the hit game Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator that Fazbear Entertainment made. And it's like, okay, great. So FNAF 6 never happened either. It's just a game within a game. So immediately this, like, okay, hold on. There was a grand cutoff when Help Wanted, the first game, FNAF Help Wanted came out. Everything prior to it, assumed everything prior, at least from FNAF 1 all the way to FNAF 6, didn't happen, right? It was loosely based on actual events. So this statement here, sure, yes, this actually happened. This was a statement. It was a statement within the game. Now, immediately, though, when you tie it to the real world of, like, why are there Nightmare On plushies? The Shadow Animatronics are still here. Special delivery, all this stuff. It's like, okay, first of all, special delivery, don't have an answer for that. Because it does supposedly take place in the same timeline, same real world as Security Breach. But the Nightmare On plushies, it's because they own that IP. Fazbear Entertainment owns that character because that's the character they developed in the Five Nights at Freddy's games. Very meta, very crazy, right? So that's why they exist there. The plushies. Why they're scattered around all of Security Breach? No idea. Security Breach was a mess. But you cannot, and this is something I've been stressing every single video that I do, I've been stressing that you cannot use the original FNAF games to justify and use as evidence for the newer games from Help Wanted and beyond. You can't. Because those games were completely disregarded and discredited of any and all actual event evidence. you don't know what the actual events were. You don't know what actually happened. You know that events happened, but you don't know which events are true or not. It could all be fictional.
This is when a simple solution clicked in my mind. Don't click away or type in the comments with anger when I say this. Just hear me out here and let me explain. What if all of these shadow entities are actually one single agony entity instead? The shadow.
Just a preface, I did not watch this video beforehand at all. The fact that I was like, maybe there's just one shadow entity that just like, depending, like the whole thing I literally just said like 30 seconds ago, I called it. I called it because it's so messy that that's the only solution, right? Man, me and Hyper Droid, we're just like that. We're like that. Man. That's wild. Hold on, what is he gonna say next?
This single entity would be feeding off of all the agony surrounding Fazbear Entertainment through the decades, and taking the form of the agony and the environment that it's specifically surrounded by. Think of it, we've never seen the shadows occupy the same space in reality. It's always one or the other. The only
That's true. That's true. Hold on, team. He might be cooking. I just said it as a joke, but hold on, there actually might be some factual evidence here.
only times they've ever technically shared the same space is the sprite for Shadow Bunny appearing in Follow Me, although that's simply just a meta hint for the players themselves, similar to the wall code appearing there too, and in Ultimate Custom Night, where multiple forms can appear at once, although that's simply in the mind of William Afton. And so seeing the many forms of the agony creature you've created that you have knowledge of as shown in Follow Me, in a place where your memory is specifically being manipulated, and by someone else who has also seen this creature, it isn't that far of a stretch. This theory explains the odd detail in the opening minigame of FNAF 6, where the representation of Shadow Freddy is the one who glitches out, a trait tied to Shadow Bunny instead, why Fredbear and Spring Bonnie both share the same shadow that's directly tied to Shadow Bunny.
I still don't like that as a piece of evidence. And you keep bringing it up.
This is also all hinted at and solvable with one specific form of the shadow, Nightmarion. Yes, the gameplay of the Halloween update isn't canon, since the nightmares must be based off Mike's gameplay in FNAF 1 and the memory of the crying child, but Nightmarion does later appear in canon through multiple games, and his replacement of Nightmare even gets referenced. In one of those games, Ultimate Custom Night, Nightmare's voice line is even paralleled with Nightmarion's voice line.
I am the fearful reflection of what you have created.
They also sound very similar, which is something I just realized.
So would this be implying that Charlie's death is connected to Shadow Freddy? Well, funnily enough, this would then be referenced with FNAF 6, showcasing a black shadowed bear, Lefty, being used to capture the puppet, which as we know is animated from Charlie's murder, and could symbolize this connection, as well as the opening.
I mean, it could. That's a very weak connection, though. Let's just disregard that. Move on.
Minigame of FNAF 6 featuring a black bear, the minigame itself specifically being based off of a death minigame in FNAF 2. This would then directly link the agony of Charlie's
I want to say it's based off of it. I think it's very similar.
death to Shadow Freddy and Nightmarion. Although if Nightmare is the Nightmare version of Shadow Freddy, then Nightmare...
Which is not. It's just a... As stated in the Ultimate Guide, it's just another version of Nightmare Fredbear. Just more whatever.
Nightmarion would be the Nightmare version of Shadow Puppet. However, in the FNAF 3 minigames we meet the Shadow Puppet, who coincidentally mirrors the crying child's final pose in FNAF 4. So if those two are already directly linked, this then connects the agony of Charlie's death and the crying child's death to Shadow Freddy, which makes 100% sense with all of Shadow Freddy's references to the bite. Then his appearance in FNAF 2, Follow Me, as well as the novel trilogy, all purposefully connect Shadow Freddy to the MCI as well.
Okay, you're losing me. Just summarize this whole part and just say every tragic event that happened, a little bit of agony was created and contributed to a huge amalgamation. That's how you sell it.
Then Into the Pit directly connects Shadow Bunny to the memory of Spring Bonnie that's made from the agony of the MCI, adding Shadow Bunny onto the chain as well, which makes 100% sense with Shadow Bunny also being connected to Charlie's death through the glitch minigame in FNAF 3 and security breach cutout as we established earlier, as well as making sense of Shadow Freddy glitching in the opening minigame of FNAF 6
this music is
similar to
actually
Shadow
pretty
Bunny,
good.
Nightmare restarting your game to the warning screen when he jump scares you in FNAF 4, being the only one who does so, which is directly taken from from Shadow Bonnie causing you to restart your game when you stare at him in FNAF 2, and the books having Eleanor involved with Shadow Bonnie, while separately luring a child with a Freddy mask to follow her, which is similar to Shadow Freddy. Then Shadow Bonnie's later appearance of Toy Bonnie would connect it to a tragedy surrounding Toy Bonnie, the DCI, which also seems to have created new forms such as Shadow Balloon Boy and Shadow Mangle, which makes 100% sense with how Shadow Freddy also do, and the books having Eleanor
Hold on. Hyper Droid, am I going to take a fast point away from you? Did you just... Oh my gosh. Hyper Droid, you just lost a fast point. You are saying that Mangle caused the bite of 87. That's blasphemy. I can't believe you would say that. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Deducted 1 fast point.
Which then makes 100% sense with how Shadow DD is the one who causes Shadow Bonnie to spawn into the night. And so there we go, we can successfully chain all of these shadows as one. They all influence it. It's an agony creature after all. It makes a ton of sense that each event would simply be feeding it more and more agony. All in all, I'm suggesting that it's possible the shadow was born from Charlie's death, taking the form of Shadow Bonnie, representing William Spring Bonnie for Midnight Motorist, being present as the etc. Therefore, this video has been in the works for a while, but it's been extremely hard to script a theory with an idea as big as this in an easily digestible way, and an understandable way at that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, I will say, okay, let's go back to the point here. So the rest of the video was just a recap, stuff like that. Yeah, no, Hyper Droid, this was an amazing video. 30 minutes long, like the amount, like just from doing the Fast Facts video and stuff, like I'm gonna do my own theories eventually that are based on actual facts, so they're like pretty solid theories, almost factual if you will, and I can only imagine like how many or how long that's gonna take me to do. This was a very long theory, which is why I'm stopping now, because I'm actually over an hour of recording time for this specific video, so it's gonna be, I think I'm gonna make a few edits here and there just so it makes sense. But let's do what we always do to these theories. We're gonna rate it on 2 different scales. Scale number 1, did this theory make sense? I give it a solid score of 7 out of 10. And the reason why it's 7 out of 10, like I really want to give it a higher score, but the reason why it's 7 out of 10 is because it's such an out there theory. The fact that you're saying that all the Shadow characters and all the Shadow animatronics we've ever experienced in this franchise, and saying that it all came from one entity, I love it. I love that idea so much. However, it's a very hard pill to swallow, especially for the FNAF community that's so like attached to these characters like Shadow Freddy, Shadow Bonnie, Shadow Balloon Boy. But I do really like the theory, and I think if there were Fast Facts that would actually solidify that, I think it makes perfect sense, and you can easily fit it into the game's lore by quite a bit. And I think it's a really cool concept, a really cool entity. But yeah, so the other metric that we rate these theories on is, did the evidence accurately solidify this video as fact, or was it all just reaching and speculation? And honestly, for this, I would have to give it a 3 out of 10, which seems harsh, but the only real factual evidence there was just the connection of like, oh, this entity is connected to all these events, so therefore it could be an amalgamation of everything. But in the end, saying it's an amalgamation and then tying it back to all these events and stuff, like it makes perfect sense. But the evidence to get there wasn't really there. But honestly, I don't think that's Hyper Droid's fault. I think this was a very vague topic that had a huge lack of evidence, so a lot of speculation was needed to even get this theory off the ground, which I 100% respect. That is very hard to do, and it's a very cool thing that took place here in this video, and it's gonna get me thinking, but I'm all for it. So I will see you in whatever Five Nights at Freddy's content you find me in next. Goodbye.